Good evening. Would you like to come up a little bit? Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Fine. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming in. And those of you who were part of the internal conversations, thank you for staying on. So it was a nice afternoon. And this is the part of the public-facing event of our afternoon. As you know, the Shyama Foundation, which runs the Shared Ecology program, is really an attempt to raise the level of conversation amongst artists and within the conversations around art and ecology, to both deepen the conversations and also to share what's going on as an artist community. And so the foundation's objective, the Shared Ecologies program's objective is to help catalyze these conversations. It's the first public-facing event we've had in the last 2 years since we've been working. And today the evening is going to be a small presentation of a few minutes of the Shared Ecologies program, which some of you have already seen today, first half of the day, first half of the event. But also, as you know, we announced a photo grant, which we'll announce the recipient of the photo grant, and Gayatri Sinha, who's kindly accepted to have a conversation with the awardee. And after that, we'll have a talk by Pranay Lal, whom many of you know, and if you don't know, you will not forget after today. So I will introduce all the three people in a moment, but before that, please have a look at a small video of 6 minutes, which my colleague Sukanya and Amjad Majid, who does all our web work, so some of you might know, have put together over the last 2 weeks. Thank you. So we are a modest foundation, like an artist-run initiative, and the objective is to deepen conversations and help catalyze practice. A few months back, we announced our first open call for a photo grant in art and ecology. We received 57 applications, and majority of the applications were very thoughtful, well-structured proposals. And from that process, through a jury-driven process, we're going to announce the person who got the grant. And I'm trying to pull that out. So the grant was for looking at photography, the photograph as the key medium, but not the only medium, but also to see how the word ecology can be interpreted, both in its many manifestations of cultural, political, social, and through other materials. So it's a research-based practice which we are looking for. And we also understand these are practices in the making. They're being informed by research and writings from different fields, including the academia, both in the social sciences and natural sciences, but also in artistic practice. And how to think of these ecological questions as deeply entangled, which somebody said today in the presentation, that I don't know how to separate them, that they're non-separable in a sense. And so the winner of the grant from the jury, which consisted of Damien Christinga, curator and writer, Latika Gupta, writer and curator. Latika's here, I believe. Or she was here. There she is. Pallavi Paul, who's currently in Berlin, artist, researcher, filmmaker. Smriti Rajgaria, director at Serendipity Arts Foundation. Vidya Shivdas, curator and director at FICA. They all felt that the project, which I'm going to announce in a moment, eloquently raised the question of hostility surrounding belonging and identity, ecological specificity and existing precariousness to prove one's association to a piece of land as the only concrete mark of their authenticity. And the person we're speaking to is here, Zishaan A Latif. Zishaan. Actually, Zishaan and I met many years back at the first Chennai Photo Biennial. But that has nothing to do with the grant, because I was not part of the grant-making jury. Zishaan has been an independent photographer since 2005, and his work stems from the intuition and passion which blends into the personal and sometimes eclectic. The art of making a photograph thrills him, which allows him to question preconceived notions of visual imagery or expectations from the various schools of thought. Notably, he has previously received the Space Studios Artist Grant 2022, Chennai Photo Biennial Photo Awards 2020-2021, World Press Photo, third prize in Contemporary Issues 2021, and most recently the Ramnath Goenka Excellence in Journalism Award 2019, presented in 2022. With the Shared Ecologies Photo Grant, Zishaan will be furthering his investigation into the unique topography and climate of Assam as he addresses the ecological realities of vulnerable communities in the region who have been termed climate refugees with time. Through photographs, video, and audio testimonials, Zishaan looks to probe and truly comprehend the extent of the climate refugee in present-day Assam, with land and identity politics playing out in real time, which have a lasting psychological impact. Zishaan, having previously worked in the region, is keen to initiate a fresh discourse that highlights the cause and impact of seasonal flooding in unique border state and its undisputed connection to citizenship. The jury further noted that it appreciated the layers of intersection between being considered through Zishaan's wishes to address through recorded local folklore, complementing the ecological specificities of the region with the multimedia output in a region where visual records can be precarious. They noted his treatment of brutality in the natural, particularly the Brahmaputra and the embankments in Assam, as violent, unpredictable forces that speak of uncertainty and the fragility of existence. While the treacherous ecology of Assam is not new, his treatment through this project in its escalation brings a new dimension to these realities. Zishaan's proposal attempts to counter the brutality of a lived reality through the poetics of its folklore. And in conversation with him will be Gayatri Sinha, whom actually none of you need any introduction, but I will anyway. It's my honorable duty to do that. Is an art critic and curator based in New Delhi. Her primary areas of research are around the structures of gender and iconography, media and economics, and social history. She is the founder and editor at Critical Collective, an online repository for writing and thinking about conceptual frames within art history and practice in India and South Asia. Recently, she has edited The Archival Gaze, a timeline of photography in India, 1840s to 2020, and Points of View, Defining Moments of Photography in India, both published by the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art. Gayatri Sinha also received the Tate Research Fellowship for 2017 and 2018. Thank you very much, Gayatri, for doing this.
Thank you.
Zishaan, you said you want to show a small clip before getting into the conversation, but I leave it to Gayatri and to Zishaan to take it forward from here. And would you like to?
We can sit here, or we can.
Would you like to come in, please? We are recording this session, this particular part of the evening. If anybody doesn't want to be in the recording, let us know, and we will make sure that you're not in the recording.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for your invitation to be here today. Thank you for this community of people who are participating with a lot of interest and investment in their ideas and what they have shared. And congratulations again, Zishaan. I just want to take off from a remark that, I mean, this was an exchange with Atul Bhalla outside about how relatable are the practices that are being engaged with today. Do we see them as a part of an art world? Is it still justifiably called a world? And has the worlding of art, in a certain sense, altered at all? What is its imprint? What are the traces and marks that it would be leaving and that are a part of our recognition of this art world? In terms of its history making, how palpably different or remarkably changed is it if we are to assess it, say, 3 decades from now? How would I be able to read the last decade of Indian art? What are its productions? What are its interests? And what is the community being able to articulate about this world? What is its driving forces? Are there a multiplicity of ideas that we're identifying with? And that's why I think meetings like this are so important, because they give us an opportunity to suture together some of the dormant ideas that we are not able to perhaps articulate in the shrunken space that we share, and which is becoming increasingly fraught and quieter and less visible. In this invisibilizing, I think a voice like Zishaan Latif is very important, because it chose a certain space of articulation. This is important because it's happening at the intersection of media and art, and I particularly appreciate the fact that both of the works that have won such plaudits initially, before he wins a string of awards, were commissions from the New York Times and from Caravan. One a global forum, the other a very local but significant publication, wherein he published in a 5-part interview, 5-part research study, his reading of Majuli and the degradation of the eroding of the lands in Assam because of the Brahmaputra. And at this intersection, we see a certain kind of a triangulation of stresses and calamitous calamitous conflation of historical possibilities. The CAA, with its reference as a perpetual possibility, the Brahmaputra as a river in full spate, whereby the Majuli Island, the most precious and the largest sort of riverine island, has shrunken from, say, 1,800 square feet in 2006 to about 325 feet in 2014, and we don't even know the status today, but where the BJP government is building a bridge from Majuli to Jorhat. How will that threaten this very fragile ecosystem? And the third part of this triangulation is what we call the climate refugee, the homelessness. We want today to have a kind of a conversation which can, of course, offset some of the content of his work and discuss the 2 or 3 major projects for which he has been recognized, but also the possibility of what will be embedded in the second part of his work for the Shyama Foundation and for the Shared Ecologies Award. I think that's a very brief introduction to Zishan's work, and maybe he can tell us more about the Charchapuri area, which is the focal point of this sort of extremely heated historic encounter of different energies. The fact is also that it is a colonial. In India, we've been so concerned about modern art. We've never really worried very much about what was the effects of colonization, what were the blowback of colonization. If we are to look at, say, the enemy territories of Pakistan, which are still held by the government of India, and where you have bills to sort of revitalize how India holds on to possessions which really belong to somebody else. Or if we look at, say, the settlement that the British invited in the Charchapuri area of Bengali residents who, from what would now be considered Bangladesh, into the Charchapuri area, and now what was a settlement of at least 100 years ago has become this hotly contested zone of conflict, Bengali, Assamese, Hindu, Muslim, and also the economies that come dependent on these constituencies. So I'll invite you, please, Zishaan, to say something before you'd like to show us your film, and then we can get into the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Shyama Foundation. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Sukanya. Thank you, Gayatri, for being here, and everybody. Thank you for the platform, and thank you for the opportunity to continue this association that I have with Assam, and to take it on forward into a new chapter, which is primarily the premise of the next chapter is citizenship, of course, but it is linked always to something concrete that they can link themselves to, which would be a piece of land that they can call home or belonging to. So an ecology is connected to citizenship almost very directly in Assam, because it's if you don't have a piece of land that is officially registered under your feet, you automatically are considered doubtful, because you keep shifting villages, places, so they can't keep a track of you wherever you go. So you become a doubtful voter, which leads you to try and fight your case in the foreigners' tribunal. So it's a very treacherous journey for vulnerable communities that live on the embankments, the Chor areas, especially because those are the communities that are highly affected by, of course, erosion every monsoon, and have to shift to an embankment area. And in that, you also tend to lose documents in the flooding. So that leads to the entire premise of the next chapter, which is citizenship and climate refugee. So my proposal, in fact, was inspired by the story of Azid Mandal and his family, who were left homeless by the deluge of 2019. That family lost that one concrete connect to an identity, an official piece of land that was registered, that would link their citizenship to India. This natural calamity, it's too cold, thank you. This natural calamity took away their land and citizenship when some of their papers went missing in the deluge, rendering them Assam's climate refugees. That will now have to fight a very robust system that now they'll have to rebuild their lives and their lost identity. So I'd like to show Azid Mandal's film that I made part of an assignment for Caravan magazine in 2019.
Can you switch on the lights?
यही से बीटा है हमारा, यही से जगह है 40 बच्चा 10 दिन मध्य बारी नहीं गलो 10 दिन मध्य बारी नहीं गलो काम करेंगे 10 दिन हाँ 10 दिन ही कैसे का मोटाने बारी गलो काड़ा 5टा 6टा 17 गलो बारी 17 बारी एक बारी नहीं गलो का नदी है नो पानी है नहीं गलो पानी है बेंगेन सुरी नहीं गलो का नदी है बेंगेन नहीं गलो का सब किसु আর ইলিপ তো দিব তোলা জায়গা জায়গায় ইলিপ দিতেছে আঙ্গির ইন্দে ইলিপের কোনো খবরই নেই চিন্তা পানি নেই নদী নাই ভাঙে নাই হেঁটে ইলিপ হইতেছে আঙ্গির ভেঙে চুরি নিতেছে মাটি জমান নিতেছে গরু বাছুর ক্ষতি হইতেছে কিন্তু তার কোনো সরকারের কোনো দক্ষতাই নাই ন সরকারের কোনো দক্ষতাই নেই কিন্তু গরিব মানুষ পয়সা হতে জোটার পাই না ভাত পানি জোটার পাই না কীভাবেই চলি চলারও তো একটা ব্যবস্থা করে নেবো পরিয়ালও তো মোটামুটি 8-9 জন আছে করে দিলে খাওয়ান লাগে এনআরসি মানে হয়েছে কিছু মানে আমার একই ডাটা ব্যবহার করছি ওটা কিছু হয়েছে আর কিছু হয় নাই এই হিসাবে মানে আছে ওই ডাবটা ই করছে না কদ্দুসের আইছে আর মানে কদ্দুর ফুলার আইছে আর আহা নাই ওটা মানে আমার আর এক ভাইয়ের আইছে আমার দ্বারা আহা নাই আমরা সেটা হিসাবে আমরা যে হেরে অনু থানা যে হেরে রিপোর্ট জানাই থানার তো আঙ্গেরে কোনো ই দেয় না নোটিশ দেয় না আঙ্গেরে নোটিশ দেয় না কী হিসাবে দেবো আমরা নোটিশ দেয় না দেয় থানাত কয়ে যে তোমার নোটিশ নিজে নিজে যে ঘরে যে দিয়ে যাবো পুলিশে তা তো নোটিশ তা হয় না আমরা ক্যাশে ডিগ্রি যে হয় কী হিসাবে দিয়ে হলে আমাদের সব ডকুমেন্ট আছে বাপের ডকুমেন্ট সব কিছু আছেই সব কিছু আছেই 50 সনের এনআরসি বাপের 50 সনের এনআরসি আছে 70-এর এনআরসি আছে 66-র এনআরসি আছে এই থাকা অবস্থায় আমাদের কোন হিসাবে ডি হয় ভোটটা এই যে এনআরসি ফিল আপ করার হিসেবে বহুত দিন ধরে দেখতেছি আঙ্গের মুসলমানের এনআরসি যে কাটাই হয়েছে ঠিক এটা তো কাটা গেছেই তার বাদেও মানে ইডি হবো বড় সমস্যা কম এনেও কাগজ বর্তমানে আছে এবার আরও কিছু কিছু কাগজ গেছে গা মানে টিউবওয়েল হইতে একটা কাগজ মানে ঘরের রাইতে টিউবওয়েল হইতে রাইতে ভেঙে নিয়ে গেছে ওটা আমরা খবরই পাইনি কোন কোন কাগজ যে গেছে তা খবরই এনে নেই টিউবওয়েলের মধ্যে একটা কাগজ আসলে কাগজটি ব্যক্তি গেছে গা এনআরসি তো নাম আহা নাই আমার মাড়িও গেছে গা এখন ধরো 2-3 বিঘা জমি বাগান বাড়ি আসলে হইলেও গেল গা আজকাল ঘর দিয়ে আরও সব বেসে নিয়ে গেল কেন মাটি নাই মাটির জমি যাওয়া ছিল করে খেলাম, এখন তো করে খাওয়ার কোনো সুবিধাই নেই, এখন কী দেখি করবো। আবো কি না আবো এটা তো ভাবে চাইতেছি না, কি হবো না না হবো এটা তো কবার হইতেছি না, এখন সব ফিল আপ করে দিছে, এখন আবো না না হবো এটা তো কবার হইতেছি না। এখন টেনশন মানে এমনি এনার্জির নাম আহানে গিয়ে এক টেনশন, এমনিরা ধরেন নদী এনে গেল ওই একটা টেনশন ভরে গেলাম গা, নানান টেনশনে ভরে গেছি গা।
So, having already worked on a story like this that clearly states the association of land and belonging identity in Assam, I felt I wanted to continue working on a similar idea, but also to bring in folklore as a form of storytelling, to lace it with history and present time. So yeah.
Can we talk about these lands, these wetlands, these riverine wetlands as a subject of art? I'm thinking of the amount of artwork that has come about. They have attracted the artist's attention in different kinds of ways. So Marina Tabassum, the Bangladeshi architect, did a wonderful work wherein she brought the houses of the Cheat Mahals to Sharjah, which is where I saw them. So these are houses which are built on the Cheat Mahals, which are like the islets, the finger-like pieces of land which project into the Sundarbans. But the waters can rise and your land can disappear. So then when the land appears 8 years later perhaps, and it's in a slightly different place, who does the land belong to? So again, this was a colonial exercise where the British insisted that land had to be registered, its dimensions and its geography ascertained, and thereafter it can be inheritance. You can give it in dowry to your daughter, for instance. And I'm trying to understand from you, what is the economy of land loss here? So in Marina Tabassum's beautiful work, they were the houses of the Cheat Mahals. They are very intricately carved works which can be unscrewed. The walls can be unscrewed and carried away, and then they can be reassembled in no time. It's something similar in these parts.
I think what I learned from my time on Majuli was how islanders have to live with nature, not against it. So how they adapt to the idea of floods, and how they live on these sangars with the
On stilts.
So I think adapting is in the blood, and they've learned to adapt. So here it would again be a mud house that can was not permanent. It can go with the river, but also then easier to also make. But you should have the money to rebuild. I think that is what the question comes. I mean, it's can you actually rebuild? That's what the question is, and so it's not. I don't think building the house is very expensive, but the idea of actually being able to afford it again, I think that's what.
But there is no compensation for land loss.
There is no, because it's not concrete. I think that's what, because it's not permanent. So I don't think there's an association with it being registered, but the village will be registered. So how many people in this village are officially part of that district, and then villages and all of that. It won't be a house per se.
I see.
Yeah.
What about how do you, as a photographer, view the subject, like such as this? We were looking through your pictures,
Yeah.
and some of them look intensely pictorial.
Right.
They are very appealing, and they could be perhaps a cinema shot from somewhere in those parts. How do you? Yet you have to arrive at a language which is, there are some which are completely different,
Yeah.
and the body appears almost with a spectral presence,
Yeah.
as if it is marking a passage in time,
Right.
and to suggest perhaps the vulnerability of the human form in this extremely fragile and precarious environment. I wanted to ask you, what was the kind of thought, ideation that would have gone behind the choice of a photographic language?
I think I went in obviously as someone who has it was a time bound assignment. So I went in with knowing that I have to make stories in a week, and I was traveling almost 4 or 5 districts in those a week. It was journalistic an approach. So my framing is it's not the best framed film, but for me it's a story was important. And I knew that this was something that even if Caravan doesn't use, I think I've touched upon a point in my journey where this intersection of land loss is equal to identity loss. For me, that was more important than I think aesthetics. Yes, it was there. I think instinctively you framing in terms of again the one that you noticed. I do a lot of no movement per se, just no movement, and let everything else move around the frame. So also like a stillness of the story and how they're reflecting on. You can see the ravenous Brahmaputra in front of you, so I don't need to do much because the character is already in motion. So I think that just to keep it simple. For me, that's always the best way to tell a story. Just to keep it as simple as possible, and yeah. So
You've also commented in different ways on Mia poetry, and I wanted to bring that up because that seems to be one of the most important literary forms that has come up in recent times.
Yes.
It's from the ground up.
Yes.
It has no institutional support. It has, there are some small...
complete disdain for it.
Completely disdainful for
And
it.
very threatening to the indigenous communities, actually. I mean, the larger indigenous communities of Assam, because it's like, how can they have a voice? So I think it comes from the fact that they want to be counted, and this Mia is almost derogatory, right? It's almost, for them, it is.
It's interesting because my family came from West Pakistan,
Right.
and Mia is a term of endearment.
That's the irony. It's they've considered it like almost like a abuse. That's what it is. Like because the Mias would be the Bengali speaking Muslims who've come and taken over land. So that's the association. So but it was a revolt. I think they came together. A lot of young Mia. Rebellious youth came together and they started writing, and Abdul Kalam Azad is one of them, and they just took on as they say, the pen is mightier than the sword. So I think they just started writing, they started exploring.
Because the poetry is not so much about land, it's about identity.
It is identity. It is, why are we not counted? We have so many people. Why are we not being counted? I mean, are we invisible? Are we the invisible? So that's what spurred them to write a lot about their community, and it's a lot of women Mia poets.
Yeah.
And yes, so there was no.
And they have seen themselves as a sort of subcontinental version of the Rohingya in some senses.
I think there's this feeling of that. I think feeling of persecution, right? And I think the coming together as a community to say we have a voice. And
but what is interesting, Zishaan, is that they have identified with Harlem, the other voices of, say, disenfranchisement across over a 100-year period.
Yes.
They're not seeking say, an echo from across the border in West Bengal, for instance, where you've also had a lot of revolutionary poetry, etc. But it's a much more broad-based kind of universalist voice, which is very striking in Mia poetry.
It's very individualistic. I think they want to really strike at the heart of the issues that are affecting them, and they're doing it uh, loudly. They don't need to, and they're using Facebook. They started on Facebook.
Yeah, it's mainly a social
It's
media
a social media,
success, yeah.
and it took on this face of rebel. And yes, one of the poets now is running to be Shehzad is going to be a MLA in Assam for to contest elections now. So yeah, I mean they've moved with yeah.
Do you want to show your photographs as well?
We'll have to have the lights.
Zishaan, maybe you could just indicate if there's any particular one you want to stop at.
Yeah. Or you can comment on them.
Yeah, I
That'd be
think
nice.
I've added like my journey through Assam. I'm very fond of, obviously, I've been going to Majuli to cover the disappearance of this very exotic land of Majuli since 2015. And I've used many different mediums to try and talk about the landscape, the land, erosion, cultural erosion as well. Because Majuli is actually the civilization of Ahom, the root of the Ahom civilization. So with land goes centuries of culture as well. Sharbindu will like that. वो थोड़ा lighting किया आपके लिए मैंने. But yes. So then this comes into the caravan bodies of work where the trunk becomes a very important symbol of belonging, literally, because it's that's how they store their documents.
The trunk.
All their important documents through the deluge, floods, weather. These trunks are
Aluminium trunks.
very important. It's like every house needs to have that trunk. It's almost a symbol of protection, and if they sense any danger, that's the first thing they take. So that's on. And of course, he was excluded from the list. He is a 11-year-old boy and his sister, a 6-year-old sister, was excluded from the list. And their home used to be here, and he's almost used to going back to where he was born. So the cattle and he go back again to what was their home. So yeah. This is a camp of the Kararkum bridge in Barpeta. This is where families take refuge once the floods hit their homes.
You mean it's like under the flyover in Delhi? Is that what it is like?
It is
near how the bridge is.
So it's a huge, almost 2-kilometer bridge, and there are char chaporis on the Beki River. This bridge crosses the Beki River, so there are embankments across that area. So so now these embankments, these refugee camps are already it's almost permanent. So that's where they are, next to the bridge, because the waters won't rise till then. She was put into a detention center for 3.5 years, and I met her just after she was released, in the middle of COVID, and she still had to go and because there was no resolution if she is because her name is still not in the list. So but they've asked them to leave the camp because of health reasons. But she still has to go every weekend to like the Hazri. Like, I'm there, I'm not run off anywhere. So that is, of course, hectares and hectares of cropland is affected in during the floods every monsoon. I just thought this image was important as like almost like a reclaiming of the self, and yeah, that's the Becky River when the tides are low.
What about the new bridge that's coming up from Jorhat all the way to Majuli? You'll have streams of visitors,
So,
people, that fragile
So
ecosystem.
that's
What
the
is
thing.
this?
There's so many debates that I had with the youth was pro bridge because they needed institutions to go and study in across. They take boats for an hour and a half across from Nimati Ghat to towards the Jorhat side. So they feel it cuts off time for them to for proper education, for medical services, because there's only one hospital on the island. There's only one college on the island. So I think the youth wants its pro bridge, but they don't realize the land on which the bridge is being made is extremely malleable and fragile.
Yeah, it'll
So
sink.
the nature of the land in the areas of across around the Brahmaputra is very fragile. So, but the older generations know that. So there's this tussle between the new and the old. Whenever I had that conversation with them on when I was in Majuli.
Yeah,
So,
the figures are quite frightening. 220 ethnic groups and different kinds of languages across the Charchapuri, all of which are threatened with
Yes.
this kind. And it will also trigger a kind of a tourist influx because this is a sinking island.
Has always been a very exotic, culturally rich island and extremely large. Obviously now eroding very quickly, but
What's happening with the Vaishnava satras over there? There are some 20 or 22 satras.
many have submerged. So, and many have had to move into the Jorhat side, or many have had to rebuild further into the core of the island. So, many have actually submerged.
So Majuli was the center of Vaishnav culture.
Yes.
So from the 16th century onwards, poets and dance, music, and so on. But now threatened with this kind of fragility. Where are we on this? Would anybody like to interject, ask any questions?
Okay. Yes.
If that's all right. Z, congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll talk about Alag Se. What I'm interested in is the tension that you're speaking about. For example,
Yeah.
you just mentioned about the tension between the older generation and the younger
Yes.
one. How do you plan on visually articulating that?
It's I'm not thinking of it right now because I'm not concentrating on that. I think she's speaking about the Majuli story. We can speak about that. But this new grant chapter is a very different kind of story. It is me documenting the plight of the man in terms of identity and belonging. So the bridge, the tensions of Majuli is a very different kind of story. I mean, she's seen all my Assam works. I think the questions are very broad, but in terms of what I'm going to be approaching this time is very identity is the core, and how land is very very important in that scheme of their existence. So I think that is what is the chapter that I will be concentrating on. There will be tensions there as well, but I mean I'll have to navigate them. That's why to have locals working with you is very important. That, of course, is paramount to how you navigate that topography. And I've not been able to do it without, obviously, people who I work with locally. And that's paramount. But there are challenges. There are going to be challenges for any kind of terrain. And this is political. It's political. It is. It's heated, especially now. I mean, the NRC story. People think it's it's nobody's talking about it, so it's not happening, but it is happening, and it is simmering. It's going to come up again. So I mean, the pandemic was just a little pause, I think.
But is there a middle ground, which is because there's obviously such a strong pro center population which supports the central government in Assam. So is there, and then there is obviously a Muslim minority which feels threatened and perhaps is thinking different politically. But is there a more moderate view of more centrist, more I don't know, which is willing to take a step back? No.
Till the incumbent is there, there's no moderation. So I mean, I don't think that is a way that they look at. So I think it'll only have to be left. I mean, people who are pro and not. So
I see.
There is no, I think, middle
There's
ground.
no middle ground.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little more about the folklore that you're drawing on?
It is, these communities have their own song, and they have their own local language like the Mia poetry. So the dialect is, and they have the history of Bangladesh, India, the transition, the movement. So they speak of all of this through song. So my proposal has the idea of using sensory, using music, using folklore, video, audio, testimonials, all of it together to bring a more sensory kind of experience to talk about identity eventually. And yes, it's their dialect that they will speak with, and they, in fact, someone who I'm working with on this project, he sings. So I'm very keen to collaborate with him in terms of, and he is one of the persecuted in the larger scheme of things. So coming from, I think, someone who's felt it is going to, I think that emotion will be felt when he lets it all out. So yeah.
Anybody else?
Congratulations, Zishaan. I've been following your work in the caravan.
Thank you.
And been really impressed by your persistence and your commitment. My question is about this relationship between the fragility of land and the seeming permanence of confinement, which is one of the destinies that awaits
Correct.
any person who doesn't find themselves in an NRC. I did some maths some time ago, and I found that the plans for detention centers in Assam are meant to include, theoretically,
4,000 people.
No, if you look at everything else, all the detention centers, if all the doubtful people are
Correct.
find a place in a detention center nowhere else, it'll be about
There's no place.
1.9 million people.
That's the total number
the
that has
figure,
been excluded.
So theoretically, the government of India and the government of Assam have to plan on detaining
11 detention centers.
11 detention centers, which will include people more than 10 times the number of people in jails in all of India.
Yes.
Right? There is one detention center in Majuli, which is quite historic.
It is.
I know it's called the Guantanamo Bay of India.
It's actually in Jorhat.
In Jorhat.
Yes.
But it's still in the island part because that's isolation was meant to be.
It's still in Jorhat. There's no jail on the island.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the brand new.
So the West Matia Golpara Detention Center has already initiated 250 to 400 people.
So are there people from Majuli there?
Sorry?
Are there any people who have been shifted from Majuli to Matia?
Not Majuli that I know of, but Feb 2023 was the first batch of people that have been shifted into the new detention center. So 250 to 400 are already in the West Matia, Golpara. I in fact have covered the construction of this very infamous detention center where बोलते हैं कि नहीं है but है but so yes, I've seen it in like its very bare form to the last story in 2021 to now full-fledged people are there and I will obviously not get access now, but let's see. I think if I can, it would be interesting to see because last time I documented workers who were making them.
I know, I saw that.
Are also going
Some
to
of
be
them,
the ones who might be detained in them.
Yeah. My question is, I know that you won't get access inside the detention center, but this, because families are divided into
Yes.
people who are excluded and who are included, and since you're interested in documentation and paper, and because I do visit prisons, I know I keep a stack of paper, which is that if you have a friend or a relative in prison, you get slips.
Yes.
And those slips may be a very interesting way of.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you.
That's all I want.
No, एक मिनट लिख लेता हूँ. It's really good. Thank you. Because I've been trying to find ways to like physically like represent that kind of that member loss. So I think that would be really important. Thank you so much.
I've seen the pictures you made of the construction.
I have because there was nobody in. I mean, and I'm anyway not going to get.
So this transition
Yeah.
between land loss, the building of the detention center,
Yeah.
and the disappearance of people, which I know you're interested in.
Yes, yes. I think that's a very important. Thank you.
The government also has plans of sending them, repatriating them to what they believe is their original homeland.
But Bangladesh doesn't want them back.
So this is a.
So yeah, I mean, it's just it's
But there are people
colossal
without records.
waste of so much.
There are no records this side or that side.
But the funny part is, I've had cases where they have said the cops have come with names, like from across the border. You have village names, and they've just said you are from this village. The Indian border patrol tells these victims you are from that village. They've made up villages to wrongfully apprehend them to start a case on them. It's quite bizarre.
It's believable.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
State and statelessness, home and homelessness. Ravi, would you like to resume your position as moderator and no, anybody else would like to comment? We can. Thank you. Thank you all.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zishaan.
Now, I'd like to invite Pranay Lal, who I hope many of you know, but I'll introduce him nonetheless. Pranay Lal is a biochemist who works on the spheres of public health and environment. His first book, Indica, A Deep Natural History of the Indian Subcontinent, won the 2017 Tata Literature Prize, the World Book Fair Award, amongst others, and was named by Mint Lounge as one of the 50 must-read books about India since independence. And his subsequent book, Invisible Empires, which he doesn't mention, is about the deep history of viruses. Yes. So, Pranay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to take you on a 4.5 billion-year history of the Earth, and I don't have any strong correlations to art or anything that you guys do. I mean, you guys do things which are so incredible. Vibha, I'm a big fan of yours. I haven't seen you for I don't know. I mean, I've seen your work, but I didn't know who you are. Is Garima Gupta here? Because I love her work. She's not here. Okay, I love her work. Okay, can we have the lights off because I've got lots of images and I'll be jumping there. So, sab light band kar dijiyega. Okay. So I'm going to talk about how deep time has influenced everything that is around us. Everything, right? And the fact that we think everything contemporary is what drives the future is a very peripheral thing. So we may curse the current government and all those things, but if you were to look at the larger scheme of things, it really doesn't matter, right? So first, thank you and congratulations, Shyama Foundation, and I wish you all the best as you step into a space which, as Gayatri ji said, needed, bringing to artists and collaborators to talk about art and taking forward serious conversations that contemporary times. Next slide, please. Oh, I will do that. Oh, will you do that? Thank you. So, about 6-7 billion years ago, and we have this number pretty precise, right? I mean, unlike history, geology is pretty near perfect science. We have no major controversies. When it comes to even billions of years, we are pretty accurate. But if you were to ask how many people died in the Battle of Panipat, or how many people died, you don't have any records, right? Those are problematic things. You don't even know how many people died in COVID, right? But things like this are pretty non-contested in some sense. Now, what happened is that the solar system was very young, and there were these two planetary bodies that came and collided because the orbits were still not fully there. I don't know. I'm not liking this. ये sound बहुत आवाज कर रहा है. हाँ? जेब में ही है. Okay. Okay. So sorry. This is. Okay. बंद हो गया. ये जरा देखिए. So sorry. This is. The orbits of the Earth were not in place, and what happened is that these two interplanetary objects or bodies just came and collided. One of this was the size of Mars, and the other was actually proto-Earth. And when they collided, they created perhaps the greatest explosion that the solar system had seen since the birth of the sun itself. Right? Now, what happened is for about 100 million years, the liquid mass just swirled around and did, what it did because it was so hot. Like millions and millions of TNT and nuclear bombs colliding together. It's like that, right? It's a huge amount of energy. And when they started to congeal together, you had two bodies that formed, and one became the Earth, the other became the Moon. And in the very early days, the Earth and the Moon were perhaps a few hundred kilometers away. Right? Now we are what, 38 million kilometers away. What happened is that the importance of this event is that it gives two very important things that we take for granted. The first thing, that the Earth is alive because of a molten core. Because we have a molten core and we have a layer above it, and then we have the crust. You have the core, you have the mantle, and you have the crust, right? And that's what gives all the energy to the Earth. Had it not been that, we would have been like the Moon. The Moon lost all its energy. The core solidified very quickly. It has no energy. It's a dull piece of rock. There's no life, right? And the second thing that happened, light क्यों चाहिए? Okay. सभी बंद कर दीजिए. मैं इतना खूबसूरत नहीं हूँ. वो भी बंद कर दीजिए ना ये लाइट. It's okay. ये देखिए ये. The second thing it did was it gave the Earth its inclination. That thing that we were never told, why the Earth rotates at 23.5 degrees, that tilt on the axis. It happened at this time. And that's the defining thing that gives us our seasons. The equator, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, right? So two things that our teachers did not tell us, class 6 geography, we get to know from this time. Next slide, please. The Earth is molten, it's like an iron ball, and it's being bombarded with meteors and asteroids that are coming from all over the galactic space, right? And this is the time when all the water, all the diamonds, all the gold is bestowed on Earth. They're all extraterrestrial elements that enter the Earth. No other extraplanetary body that we have examined so far has either permanent source of water, gold, or diamonds. So we must, I mean for gold and diamonds, I'm sure all of you are happy, but water is critical. Next slide, please. But not all meteors or meteorites create a gaddha, a kind of a crater. There's some meteors that actually create a pimple when they go into the Earth, when they collide. They actually raise the Earth because they create so much heat that it actually comes back. There are only two such structures. One of them is in India. The other is in Russia, northwest Russia. And this is very close to Delhi. In case you have a moment to spare, if you're going to Gwalior, it's a little detour from Gwalior. Have a look at it. It's a marvelous site. It's on an extremely plain countryside. It's just absolutely boring. And suddenly you see this maroon-colored mountain coming out of nowhere. Looks like a sore, piece of landscape which has no reason to be there. But it's created 2.8 billion years ago, right? Next slide, please. For a very long time, we had volcanoes like we have today in Indonesia, and we have one volcano in India, right, in the southern tip of Andamans. There's only one kind of a dormant volcano. But it's the volcanoes that actually give us all the elements. They're pushing out new energy from the core of the Earth. And that's the thing that is creating all the heat and all the energy that's coming on the surface, bringing out new elements and new minerals. Next slide, please. And you have these structures or these landscapes which are actually volcanic called fire fountains. And about 66 million years ago, Bombay and Pune would have been seeing something like this. Anybody here from Bombay and Pune, driving through them, you would see these wavy structures, especially just as soon as you cross the Lonavala Ghat, you will see these wavy structures. And this is what created it. Very, very, if you see it in, say, the island of Irkutsk in the Kamchatka Peninsula, or even in the west island of the Hawaii region, you see these wavy volcanic rocks. Next slide, please. This is very close to where we are today. This is a picture taken from Faridabad, and this is from the Aravallis. Now look at the beauty of the rock. It is actually chemistry, and I don't know how many of you like chemistry, but as painters and artists and photographers, I think all of you should respect chemistry, because that's what art is all about eventually. How your colors spread, or how photographs develop, or whatever. Or even your laptops, right? It's all pure chemistry. We call it Silicon Valley for a reason, right? Because silicon is like carbon, a very, very versatile element. And this is the reason why. Look at this rock. You see at least 3 different colors. The most dense element is right in the center. It's like a filter paper. There's a very famous German artist called Max Gottlieb. I don't know whether you know about him. Incredible artist. He used to take Wattmann filter paper number 1, large sheets, take dyes, put it in the center, and they would spread out. Absolutely beautiful drawings. He would write, things about, Jewish history and, the Nuremberg trial and things like that. Very interesting artist. But, it's something like that. And this is what happens when rock is cooked and recooked. And new minerals come in and they get heated again. And you see amazing variety of rocks, even in a place like Delhi and Faridabad, where you think there are not good enough rocks. Of course, they're not very exciting, because if you were to go to, say, Dholpur or to Jodhpur or, Dharwad, you see even better rocks. But even when you were to look at places which we think are dull, there is beauty in it. Next slide, please. The first time that we encounter life on Earth, it's the microscopic organisms. I'm not going to go into the history of how life evolved and other things, but the first signs of microbes, when they come together, they have to survive, and they're fighting the elements like the bombardment of meteors and things like that, and the emissions that are happening from volcanoes, right? It's lots of heat and lots of radiation and all that happening, right? The organisms get together and form colonies. This is one such colony. This is a colony of organisms called cyanobacteria. They are the creatures that actually were the first to start producing the oxygen that you and I breathe. This particular fossil is from a place called Sonbhadra, right? This fossil has got extinct because Colgate, the manufacturer of toothpaste, used this to make toothpaste, right? So we don't have very many fossils. I've got 2. I just went and salvaged before, the mine owner, the Jiski leased he just decimated it and then went on to find the next phosphate mine, and that's it. It's over. So rocks also get extinct. Landscapes also get extinct. What was the role of this phosphate in feeding into the river? What was its larger role in regulating water or soils or whatever? There was a purpose for this even then, and all of it is gone, right? So while we think that rocks are embedded and there's so much of it, trust me, they're getting extinct. Anybody from Hyderabad here would know that the Inselbergs, these beautiful rocks, are getting extinct, right? So much oxygen was produced by these guys. They've actually been the longest reigning creatures in the world ever, and there will be nobody else. They colonized the earth 3.6 billion years ago until about 750 million years ago. For about 3 billion years, they ruled the earth. They created all the oxygen that we breathe, plus the ozone layer. And they gave us 3 very large ice ages. In fact, the ice ages were so strong that it not only covered the poles, but also the equator. It was called the snowball Earth event, and it happened thrice. But it's only after a massive volcanic event that happened near Jodhpur that the final freezing of the Earth, finish off. And that gave rise to the multicellular animals. So 750 million years ago, the first multicellular creatures start to form. I'm sorry I'm dazzling you with all these billions and millions. Just forget it for the moment. Just think it's a huge amount of time. But we must respect the microbes because they continue to give us all the free oxygen that you and I breathe. Trees do not give you oxygen. Okay? Trees do not give you oxygen. Trees are selfish. Okay? And I'm not saying don't plant trees. I love trees. What trees do is they produce oxygen, but they will consume it the next day. It's like a ledger, right? The oxygen comes in, the oxygen is needed the next day. Organisms, on the other hand, have a very short lifetime. They will grow today, they will grow for a day or two, then they die and sink in the water or in the soil, right? They've produced their oxygen, they've captured the carbon dioxide, they become organic matter and sunk deep inside. That's the oxygen and carbon cycle that happens in nature, right? Trees are very, very, one, selfish when it comes to oxygen consumption and production, and second, because they stay on the surface, they're really not climate regulators in that sense. The reason is because they have to get buried deep into the earth to become petrol or coal, right? And this is the fundamental problem in today's climate change agenda. I don't think anybody tells you this. Everybody wants you to plant trees because it's, one, politically acceptable, and 2, it makes you feel good. There's no scientific challenge to it, right? Next slide, please. I think everybody knows this, right? This is something that we all encounter. This is the age when we started to produce synthetic chemicals. So we add about 22,000 synthetic chemicals since the 1970s. That's the estimate that we have, right? We add, maybe there could be a few grams, or there could be a few tons if you're producing pesticides or any other chemical. It can be in tons or it can be in very small quantities. But we produce chemicals that are not known to nature. So there is no process of assimilation, digestion, breakdown, which organisms know, right? So that, I think, is a fundamental problem because this is, yeah, you could come to the next slide, please. So what has happened is that if you remember the first slide that I showed you, the two planetary bodies colliding with one another. That's the time when the earliest minerals came to exist, right? And when the volcanoes were, being overcharged, the third slide that I showed you, that's the time when we added another 150 minerals. That's because it was getting heated and reheated. That's the moment when they started to get, combined again or broken up. And the final thing is, remember the thing that I showed you from Sonbhadra, the ones that were adding oxygen, all the oxygen, then you start getting oxides, right? And that added another 3,000 minerals. So most of your things, your veneer on this is an oxide. So, but the problem for us now is the umpteen number of chemicals that we are adding, which our microbes don't know how to digest. Forget more complex creatures. They don't know what to do, right? Acha, now the theory is over. Now we're going to have fun. Okay? Next slide. I'm going to tell you a story from the time just before of dinosaurs. I'm not going to go to billion years. Remember, it's only 290 million years. India is here. India is under ice. Okay? India is under ice. Greenland is up there. It's actually green. Does anybody know why Greenland is called Greenland? Anyone knows why it's called Greenland? Okay. So there was a Viking leader called Eric the Red, right? The famous Eric the Red. And he said he wanted to get people from the Viking countries to come and colonize Greenland. And he did not know how to incentivize their travel from there. So he said, this is the country that is green. And the summers here are 9 months. And when people came and they saw it's even more frozen than Norway or Sweden. So that's the kahani. And I'm not joking, this is the kahani. By the way. This is the story. That's the legend. Why am I showing you this? Because nothing on earth is permanent. India is going to do a large ballroom movement here. In fact, all the things that will move from here. Egypt is here. That's America. That's Greenland. If you were to, if you're in Calcutta, you don't need a visa to get to Perth. You could actually walk. Two great, fast bowling pitches, Eden Gardens and Perth, Waka. You can go right across. If you're in the Malabar, getting to Pretoria or to Cape Town is very, very simple, And this is what, creatures of the time would, just move from one continent or one landmass to another. Next slide, please. And see what happens. The volcanoes get hyperactive. They add more lava, but the Earth is still congealed together. In fact, it's come closer, right? Look at India. It's now at 255 million years. Much of the Earth is green. This is the time when oxygen levels have slightly depressed from that frozen period, but the Earth is entirely green. There are very few deserts. The deserts are up in the north, that's China and Russia. You've got some desert in, where we have semi-arid areas even today, Tirunelveli and Tiruchirappalli and, that part of Arcot. That's the area that was a desert even at that time, or semi-arid at that time. Antarctica at this time is entirely semi-arid. Next slide, please. This is how the forest looked like 255 million years ago, and this is very important. There are no flowering plants at this time, okay? You have palms, you have something called lycopods, these tall things that you see, these structures, they go up to 20, 25 meters. They're very beautiful. When you see a fossil of a lycopod, it's absolutely gorgeous. And these are cycads, what we call ghar pe palms, but they're not palms, they're actually cycads. There's those small guys on the thing, and they're actually getting extinct. This is what used to give us sabudana, by the way. The sabudana you eat now is a corrupt version, by the way, because Navratras are going on. I'm telling you, if your mothers or you or anybody is doing your puja and you think your sabudana is going to help you, no, it's not, because it is made out of tapioca, which is actually making your dharam brushed. Because see, we used to use in our ancient, not ancient, in our historical times, we used to use this plant, this one, right? And we used to use the stem of this, dry it up, and make sabudana, right? Now what has happened is we're getting a South American root crop. We grow it in central India, dry it, and make it into sabudana, and that's a fraud. Okay, let's come back. What happens, why am I showing you this picture? It's not for the beautiful drawing that Jun Wang and Herman Kofferkorn have made, but it's because this is the crop, or this is the vegetation that sank in water many times. Notice that this is on water. And you had this big ingress of the sea and lakes that would happen day in and day out. And when this sank, it gave you all the coal and all the petrol that you use now. And this is the reason why we have climate change today, because we depend on fossil fuels that were made 255 million years ago, right? So there were reams and reams of these forests that were sinking day in and day out, compressing it, okay? Next slide, please. And what were the creatures that used to live there? This is the creature, the ancestor of the toads, the modern frogs and toads and newts and salamanders. This used to be the size of a nano car, okay? And they were very intelligent creatures. They would actually walk in herds, and they would go all across Antarctica, South Africa, India, Australia, and go in a circle grazing on these beautiful cycads, horsetails, and ferns. The ancestors of the crocodile were already there, but they were not the dominant creatures. They were tiny, they were not as large as they are today. But what is our interest here is this creature. This is called a mammal-like reptile. It's not a true mammal. Okay? Now what it has is got a hollow tooth, like a snake, right? That means it had a poisonous fang. If you were to, I mean, this is not a good projector, but you know, the drawing is fantastic by Peter Trussler. It's got a segmented tail, which is like a snake. Its underbelly was also snake and had scaly underbelly. So it's called a mammal-like reptile because the true mammals would emerge from here after a viral infection. All creatures shown here are creatures that gave birth by giving eggs. So in my second book, I actually tell that viral infections are the ones that actually gave you a placenta. So a lot of women have difficulty in conception, right? You have ectopic pregnancies or you have spontaneous abortions, right? And that happens because your immune system thinks that the virus is overreacting in your body and it attacks it. So a lot of women cannot conceive, or they're given immune suppressants so that the placenta can get embedded and they can conceive, right? So the viral infection that happens to this guy is the one that creates the true mammals, the ones that give live birth. Okay? Right, next slide, please. 251 million years ago, there's a massive crisis on the Earth. There's a volcanic activity happening in a place called the Perm region in south central Russia. There's a massive undersea volcanic activity which releases a lot of methane. The whole Earth turns purple. I don't know why this image is coming like this, but it turns purple, you know. And 95% of all creatures die. Okay, this is the biggest extinction that the world has ever seen. But what it does is that it leaves a few pockets and few pools of water where there's some survivors. Okay, not all mammal or mammal-like reptiles died. Some sharks, some crocodiles, some insects, and a few others, a handful of creatures that survive in these pools and these relict sanctuaries is from where every other creature that evolved subsequently takes over. And who takes over from here? It's the dinosaurs. Okay, it will take another 40 million years for them to, come back to spring up. But from the amphibians, you remember the ancestors of the frog? It's the reptiles who come to fore. Next slide, please. Now 200. I'm going in 50 million years. Okay. Now look at this. Antarctica. Greenland has moved further north. If you notice, India's moved north as well. We are getting closer to the equator. Next slide, please. And again, the seas have started to open up. When I say the sea opens, it is not the sea that opens up. It's the land under the sea that starts to split. Okay? And what it does is it starts to give us the outlines of all the continents that are there today. So you see Australia, you've got Antarctica, India, Madagascar, Africa, Latin America, or rather South America, North America, China, Russia. Next slide, please. And you have a series of volcanic activity that happens and splits continents. So first, it is something called the Bouvet plume. There's an island by the name called Bouvet. Have a look at it. It's one of the most windiest places in the world. Next slide, please. And then you have another volcanic activity. Next, just if you please. Yeah. Yeah. No, next, please. Yeah. Yeah. So there's another activity that happens here. Anybody here from Jharkhand or Bihar? No? Okay. Oh, you're from Bihar. So there's a place called Rajmahal, right? The Rajmahal Hills. This is where the the Shillong Plateau and the Rajmahal Hills got created at this time. That's what separates Antarctica, Australia, and India, the eastern margin of India, from each other. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Okay. Once more, please. Yeah. So, sorry, go back. Sorry. So what happens is now you've got the outline about 100 million years ago. You have the outlines, but you've got massive numbers of sea. But the time, at this time, you've got dinosaurs ruling the world, right? From 251 million years to this time, I mean, this is the longest reigning vertebrate, land ruling vertebrate ever. We are not even close to it. We are only 70,000 years old, right? So these guys have ruled for about 155 million years. So we should not even attempt to say that, you're dinosaurian in your approach. Dinosaurs were highly successful creatures. They were extremely diverse and perhaps even very intelligent. I mean, not only gorgeous to look at and massive, but also incredibly, incredibly sophisticated in terms of survival. Next slide, please. This is the time when grasses appear. Now, this is very important because as mammals, I'm not going to say humans yet because the ancestor of the humans is really, really 100 million years ahead now. But you start seeing grasses to appear, and the first example of grass actually emerges from India. Next slide, please. And again, 20 million years later, there's an event that happens that right here, anybody from Mangalore would know this. It's called the St. Mary's Island. It's a beautiful island. Have a look at it. It's gorgeous. And it separates Madagascar from India. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Next slide. Thank you. And what happens is, this is the time when the demise of the dinosaurs begin. The first eruption of the Deccan lava causes the death of the large trees. And the big sauropods, the big, the gargantuan, what you know as Brachiosaurus and Brontosaurus, all those big dinosaurs that are leaf munchers and eat the top of the canopy of trees are the ones to die first. And this happens first in what we know as, in the Punjab, Sindh area of Pakistan. And that leaks into Gujarat and then into Maharashtra and then into the Indian Ocean. So you have a size larger than the size of Spain and France combined at this time, which is oozing out a lot of lava. And that's causing so much acid rain, killing all the large trees first. Next slide, please. The second episode happens, and then it starts flowing into the earth from Bombay area. For people who live in Bombay, you see that finger-like projection. Or if you've seen again the map of the Western Ghats, you've got Bassein, you've got Valsad, those kind of places which are like fingers jutting out, made out of single rock, very large basalt which has frozen. Next slide, please. There's a beautiful drawing, one of my favorite paleo artists, Douglas Henderson. And this is how the Deccan lava would have looked like. This is a work in crayon and pastels. No, yeah, not crayon, pastels. Look at this. Such beautiful, delicate work. And it just shows you the buildup of ash, which is so big. And you've got these fire fountains in a distance. You remember those pictures that I showed you? The fire fountains? Those are at the distance there. You've got this massive emission happening, which is going to go all around the world and kill the large trees. Next slide, please. So you have this layered cake effect, because you've got deposition upon deposition of this lava that kept flowing out, right? And this is how you see, if you travel between, any place between, in the Western Ghats, you see this in the monsoons. So it's a very beautiful sight. Next slide, please. You also see lava chambers, but the government actually has a policy to destroy them. So we had 181 of them. Today we've got 4 left. Because all the gitti that's used to make your roads comes from here. In America, I have to pay about $50 to see it. In India, it has no value. So we've got these last 3.5 that remain. And this is the half that I'm talking about. that we've got protected because we did a litigation. So it's taken us 11 years to get this litigation, and finally we got it protected. But all the roads in central and western India are actually made from the rock, this is what it is done, right? The half that I told you, this is the gitti that's being made. But these are beautiful chambers. Next slide, please. And this is how the chambers actually look in the natural setting. Here's a man for reference, right? Here's a man in reference. So if you see films like, I don't know if you guys are film buffs, but if you see a film like Hum Hindustani, it's got Sunil Dutt singing, no? I don't know, nobody's a film buff here. Okay. It's a very stupid film, socialist film, but it's got, again, if you know Bombay, it's showing you the hills that have got, pulverized to make gitti as you develop the VT station or the various stations in Central and Western Railway of Bombay was made by, bombarding these rocks. Next slide, please. And then you see it very commonly in Goa, for example. There's any black rock that you see flowing in the sea, that's the Deccan lava flow. Next slide, please. And of course, you've got this beautiful rock on which you have, what's called cave number 6. It's not a cave, it's actually a temple. What's called Kailash Nath, Ellora. Yeah, cave number 16, yeah. And yeah, Pichewala is 3. And it's such a gorgeous cave. And it's a single structure. And we now know that, the construction started from the top of the hill and it went down. That's how. And think about it. It took how many 100 years to make it? So many different architects, so many different designers. All of them came and left. So many died. Millions of people, or man hours or woman hours into making this. But the exquisite nature of this, the success of it is because of the rock. The Chandragiri mountain range, that small range, is because it's a very nice, soft, soap-like rock that you can actually carve, right? And this is one reason. I mean, one of the reasons why I got slapped in school was that I asked my teacher that, Shivaji ruled only for 16 years, of which 3 years were in exile. But how could he make 41 forts, including Janjira, which is perhaps the most difficult fort to make? It's in the sea, right? It's on an island, and they made this imposing structure, right? And that's because the success is because of the rock. The rock is right there. It's easy to carve, right? It's easy for you to hew it, and it becomes what it is, right? Next slide, please. But this is the time also when the Deccan lava flow ceases and the dinosaurs have got completely extinct. It's small mammals who take center stage. For a moment, the large birds, which are actually the descendants of the dinosaurs, and the land crocodiles are the ones that fight, and they make their lives miserable for each other. But the creatures that actually make most of it, from the internecine conditions between the flightless birds and the crocodiles, are these small creatures. Next slide, please. And this is 50 million years ago. 15 million years after the Deccan lava has ceased, this is where India is. India becomes the most crucial landmass in the evolution of mammals. How so? Because from Shanghai up to Gibraltar, you've got this narrow sea called the Tethys. It starts like a ribbon across. And this is the place where all the large mammals will emerge. The hippopotami, the rhinoceros, everything except the horses. The horses emerge evolve in the Americas. The cats, the horses, the dogs, the bears, and the most interesting experiment in animals, the whales. The whales were the only creatures which actually went back to the sea and became immensely successful because there were no more large reptiles. The only challenge they had were the sharks, right? So let me just show you the next slide. So the other innovation that happens is at this time, remember I told you there were no flowers, or there were no flowering plants? This is the time when the flowering plants emerge. And the large gymnospermic trees tend to subdue themselves. They become palms, they're isolated. Then you don't have a forest of palms, right? You have a forest of bamboo, yes. But other than that, you don't have any more dominance of non-flowering plants anywhere in the world. It's the time of the flowering plants. And next slide, please. And the creatures, the mammals love it, because not only do flowers provide pollen and nectar and fruit, but they also attract lizards and geckos and insects and many other things. And this is a feast that they love. Next slide. And you have rapid evolution. What was once your cousin has now become your enemy, because the evolution in mammals is so quick that what appears, these are related creatures separated at, by a few million years of evolution, but they would share an ancestry. One's become a pure carnivore, the other is a fruit eater. And that's how mammals are. You've got fruit-eating bats, you've got flesh-eating bats. Right? So you have within the same family a variety of creatures that either love meat and blood and the other loves fruit. Right? It's like humans, right? Lots of us who love meat, the others who like fruit. So it's that kind of a thing. And this is a typical scene from a place called Vastan in western Gujarat. We've reconstructed, when I say we, paleontologists who've collected fossils and pollen and things like that. We've been able to piece together how the forest would have looked like. We can actually go back into the making of the trees, the numbers of different kinds of species of animals, and the kinds of birds that would have lived at the time. Next slide, please. And India finally collides at about 52 million years ago, and the first signs of snow and ice is seen on Tibet and Antarctica. Notice there's no Arctic. Arctic is actually a worthless piece of landmass, and it has no role in climate. I mean, it has a role for the Nordic countries, but if you were to look at the global scene, it doesn't have a major role. The reason why I say this is because this is the massive landmass which is important. You've got a circumpolar current which actually controls all the other major currents that actually flow from here. The Arctic is a very shallow sea. The Arctic Sea is actually very shallow, right? And it doesn't have any currents that actually could influence any of the currents that come to, say, Japan or the North Atlantic or the Pacific. It's the currents in the Antarctic Ocean. Next slide, please. One of the big tragedies of India is that we don't have paleo artists. So we can't inspire our kids. It's a massive problem. We just don't have artists. And this is a sketch I did of how whales evolved in India. It started with the small mouse deer-like creature that started to enjoy eating pond weeds and reeds and the succulents that grow in around the water area, and they started to duck inside. And it's that adaptation of ducking in and holding their breath, they develop the ability to stay longer in water, and while there, their distant cousins and others developed a taste for crabs and other things, and that's the reason why some mammals eventually evolved, becoming the whales that we know today. Right? These are the intermediate ones that exist, and we have wonderful fossils of them. So we have no museums to show these. We don't have paleo artists that can inspire. Right? So it needs an idiot like me to draw these kind of sketches and try showing children, this is what perhaps happened. That's the best I can do. Right? Next slide, please. And these are beautiful rocks. I mean, this is how when India collided and the sea was narrowing itself, this is how you see. This is the river Shyok. Where would this be? This is east of Chadar, the river Chadar side, that side. Yeah. So this is basically, this is Eurasia and this is India. This is what the photograph shows. And you can actually see that a river. So the boundaries of India, if you want to ask where are the boundaries of India, Brahmaputra goes till Kailash. From Kailash, you see Indus, that's coming. That's the piece that actually is India, which collided into Eurasia. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay. I don't know how much time we've got. It's 8:05. Can I take 10 more minutes? Okay. So, I mean, where is the art in it? So I'm just gusadoing some art in it now because you guys are artists here. I mean, I'm just had to, pull my hair and say, where is the art in it? So, one of the best pieces of art in terms of revolutionizing the way people saw landscapes was this piece of a map, if you can say, by a guy called William Smith. Now, he was a coal prospector. He used to work with collieries in England, and he would go and say which rock type could possibly house lignite, anthracite, or coal. Coal being the best, right? Now and this is the long name of the of the map, but it's actually known as William Smith's 1815 geological map. Next slide, please. And it's actually in 15 pieces that are all pieced together. So that's the granular level of detail. And he also had an accompanying map, which was this, which actually went from Snowdonia to London, which is the Vale of the Thames, right? The River Thames, and that's how he actually wanted to show that this is the diversity of the rock that exists in England, right? Next slide, please. But we've done pretty okay also. I mean, our miniature paintings also bring out some relevant examples. And this is, can you go next, please? So, I forgot to put okay, so this is, I think, 1785, the previous one, is actually shows you the rhyolite of Jodhpur, the beautiful rhyolite on which Mehrangarh is now located. Next slide, please. Now, this is Udaipur, as you notice, but again, look at the lovely jagged rocks and especially on top, you can see the jagged rocks of the Aravallis. Next slide, please. And again, this is something from the Deccan, and you can see Inselbergs. Now these are the kind of rocks that you see in say Hyderabad, right? These tall, phallic-looking rocks, which are, kind of, you see them coming out as islands of outcrops called Inselbergs. Next slide, please. Again, a beautiful drawing, but I think there's a huge amount of European investment in terms of inspiration. And you see this because you see very interesting drawings here, or details of hill and the rock type. Next slide, please. And again, for the first, I mean, there's not very good evidence of Maratha painting using landscape but this is one of them which shows you the use of the Deccan rocks. You can see Deccan rocks all over, and you see some fortification in the corner. And I think there's no other evidence of, Shivaji constructing a fort. You never had those kind of paintings. I wonder why. I mean, you don't have paintings of plagues and influenzas and deaths. I mean, you had this in the Middle Ages in Europe, right? You had what is called the morbid drawings of the Flemish country or France and Italy in particular. You don't have any of those in India. Right? We never talk about any of these facts that were, other than outside of the court patronage, there was no other drawing. Or at least nothing survived. Next slide. Okay, we're going to have some fun now, thoda sa, even lighter. So I don't find any good drawings of Indian dinosaurs, which I think I've complained to you about. So I mean, I'm hoping some of you would take it up. But you find stuff like this, yeah. So I went to Pune, there's this large collection of Lotpot and all that, and Chotu Motu and all that. So, I mean, where do I get photos from, for Indian dinosaurs? So this is what I got. So I trust me, I didn't use any of these. Next, for my book, next slide. And crazy creatures, Akrosh ki aankh, kyun yaar? Whatever, next slide. I mean, they don't even live in the same generation. I mean, epoch, right? I mean, this is a hilarious film. Please watch it. This is the second film in which Mumtaz acts. I mean, I didn't watch it for Mumtaz. She was 15 years old. But, it's got a very interesting, it's an interesting film. I mean, yeah. So you've got a creature like this, and Dara Singh fighting with it. Next slide. And then the same year, next year, you've got Gogola, which is actually inspired from the Japanese, not King Kong, Godzilla. Yeah, so you've got Chopati. If anybody recognizes Chopati Girgam of Bombay, right? This is, and this has Dig Jam shootings. I don't know who. I mean, nobody older than me here, but Dig Jam shootings used to be our thing. So and then this is Tabassum. For those of you who recognize who Tabassum is, a chirpy old lady of Indian cinema. Next slide, please. I mean, I could go on, but let's come to this. This is perhaps the worst film you could make on a dinosaur. I'm not a big fan of Ashish Vidyarthi and Jackie Shroff and Mithunda. I mean, I'm not saying it for that reason. So, what the problem is, can you come to the next slide? I'll show you what the problem is. Now, they've made this creature, it's a solitary living creature in a jungle, okay? Now, if it lives in a thick jungle, this is bad evolution. Why? So these teeth are used only by fish catchers. These kind of exaggerated teeth are seen in creatures who, like deep sea fish, for example, the viper fish and the others, would have exaggerated teeth like this. What is the point of having spikes and spines? If you're the biggest creature, you don't have to protect yourself from anything. And anyways, if you live in a tropical forest, this is going to stop you from moving. Why should you have this? You know. So whoever designed this creature for this film is, I think, needs a paleo class from me. I mean, that's the least I think I can say. And of course, the film bombed. And if you ever go to Kolkata, as soon as you reach Bidhan Nagar, the junction of Bidhan Nagar, there's a Maidan where you can see it. It's all still there. It's rotting. It's peeling off, and like what 5, 7, 8 years ago that this film was made. So yeah, it's a horrible film, but this is how we treat. I mean, you've got examples from Jurassic Park and even B grade, third grade Hollywood films which are doing a fantastic job even with CGI, but we don't use it. And this is the tragedy. What I think we have in real life. When it comes to science, when it comes to science communication, or it comes to even science illustration, there's not a single good science illustrator that I can find in India. Not one. Like I said, in China, they've got a network of 800 paleo artists. 800. 42 museums in China that talk about about paleontology. They've got mounted skeletons. Has any one of you seen any dinosaur in India? Mounted? There are only 2. One in Hyderabad, the other is in IIC Calcutta. IIC Calcutta is so far and so far away from the city, people just keep it shut. Right? If you go to the Hyderabad Birla Science Center, you can't take a selfie there. So children come there, they can't take a selfie with the dinosaur. Why not? That's how stupid we are. Right? Next slide, please. Oh, I'm not going to bore you with this. Next. This is for okay, so this is the book I wrote. It's available on LibGen. Please don't buy it. Only if you want to hold it and read it or whatever, just buy it. Otherwise, it's available free. Don't buy it. Yeah. So thank you. This is what I have to say. Some questions? Yeah, sure. If I know the answer, that I will answer. I don't know. No questions. Wow. So Gondwana land was the last of the 2 supercontinents that existed before. Remember the time that I showed you from 255 million to 90 million years when so the southern continents were called Gondwana. It was given by a guy called Edward Suez. He named it. He was an Austrian geologist, and he had this romantic notion about the Gond people about whom he had read. That they were the gentlest people and they lived in harmony with nature and all of that, which was not all correct, but that's what he read from colonial records. And he imagined that the same bunch of people, because the continents were together, at that time they did not know the origin of man, and they did not know when the land masses had separated. So he imagined that the same set of people lived in Australia, in Papua New Guinea, in Western Africa, all those kind of people, the same ancestral breed. But of course, that's not right.
Thank you for the talk. Thank you for the book. It's like one of the illuminating books I've read.
Thank you.
So there are 2, 3 things. First is about this comment on the big rituals, if we can say that. Yeah. So there was a time when I was doing some research about apocalypses, and I was interested like how different civilizations imagined their end of their society. So if you go to like Indian or any like Egyptian and those kind of imaginations, you'll find that most of the apocalypse happened due to flood. Flood was one of the event everybody imagined. And I was thinking how I can construct any speculative way how I can imagine apocalypse. So I was in fact taking these B-grade films because of their quality and low production values. It represent apocalypse in a better way rather than the high production value of Hollywood films, because Hollywood films, that glossy image never can be about apocalypse, because we are talking about environment disaster and a lot of things where your camera is shaking and you will never have that kind of clear image. Yeah. So in fact this was helping me more to imagine that apocalypse because of the quality and all. So this is a comment about that. And Okay, so I read your book many times for two reasons. One is one question that's becomes one question that what's your take on Anthropocene, the philosophy of Anthropocene? Because for me, it's one of the stupidest philosophy I found because I could not. So, like last 1 year, I have spent in a group mentorship program where we have been discussing Anthropocene, and I hear a lot of talks, and I don't have any strong. Even I did not hear any strong argument to back Anthropocene philosophy. Instead, there is this debate about Capitalocene. Now they replace it to that and they talk about that. So that's another debate. But what's your take that I want to hear on Anthropocene philosophy? Second is your book, because it talks about this the geologic time, it's vast, the timeline is like really expand to all direction. So I have used your book to actually make anti-ecological debates more powerful because that gives the way you told about trees, and also you mentioned in the book perhaps trees not even they don't even recycle the carbon, they just accumulated it. That's why it either become coal, or if you burn it again goes to the air. That's why it produces smoke and carbon dioxide, because you never recycle it, just keep it like a bank or something. So your book, because it's immersive, it's because it's large, it has lot of things which, like the imagination of water and oxygen and all this, you can really use against ecological debate, what we discussed in the morning today. So how do you see, because philosophically all these kind, like it's like a bankruptcy, it's like you exploit your own philosophically. That's I'm like really Jews, I must say, because I'm
No,
at the
okay.
stream of.
So, I mean, let's yeah. I think what you're talking about is the Anthropocene. I think a lot of you are going to be working on the Anthropocene. I think that's perhaps the strongest political statement that, as an artist, you will be making. I think the evidence on Anthropocene that we have is that 1750, 1850 is the time when all of it started, right? I mean, the accumulation of carbon dioxide. Well, that is true. But remember that the just before the time when we started to settle to form the first civilizations, remember that our ancestors who started to domesticate animals and plants were burning forests. So, for example, you had a swathe of forest between, say, the Indus Bank to North Bengal, where it does not exist anymore, right? The Central Indian grasslands, the bunnies, don't exist anymore, right? I mean, you got small patches, very tiny patches. Now, when the grasses are gone, there's no carbon, right? So we had this massive clearing by human beings and then growing things like rice. So methane production increase. So there's a small blip that happens at that time also, and it is a permanent blip, right? We also lose out on the carbon capture. Not only have we lost the opportunity to capture carbon, but also the whole opportunity that the soil microbes that live there no longer exist, right? So the other challenge is that if you were to go to say show me a remnant of the Gupta period, right? Is there a palace? Is there Harshvardhan's palace? None, right? Why? Yeah? Wood, right? So wood clearance happened. The other thing that happened was that wherever there was brick, the brick also consumed a lot of wood. So as a result, we just never had enough wood in this country, at least in the pockets where the wood was used to make cities, right? So if you go to, for example, the ghats of Banaras, most of the bricks that are there are the ones that are stolen from Sarnath. So a lot of stupas, are actually broken down. The bricks have been taken in the 1600, 1700, 1800 by all the rajas who were making their ghats, right? So that is the amount of paucity of wood that we had, because nobody could make. There was enough soil to cook, but there was not enough fuel to cook the thing. So I think those are the kind of intricacies that we also need to bring if we want to alter, modify the behavior from now on. I mean, I find it personally very perverse, and I hope there's nobody, a saffron-clad person here. But, I find it perverse that, we burn bodies in pyres. I mean, why? Why do we have to do choti holi and you burn in pyres? I mean, we're going to have heat and it's already very polluted. You play holi when there's going to be water shortages that are happening and you're going to put chemicals in it. I think a lot of our religion and religious practices or cultural practices as well have to now modify and keep up with the times, because we don't live in the times of Krishna where Holi could have played with so much gulal and abir and it was fine to pollute the Yamuna. So I think those kind of things need to be looked at. So I think when you talk about the Anthropocene, you need to say what are the kind of corrections we need to bring in old practices, because only then can you be thinking about addressing the problems of the Anthropocene now. Otherwise, we can keep lamenting about, we can talk about Turner and, his paintings and, how he was showing, air pollution and all those kind of things. I mean, I think that's been talked about 100 times. I don't need to tell you about that. But the fact of the matter is, where do we go from here? And that's the role that I expect artists like you to, challenge the people who you reach out to. I think that's where it comes. I don't know if I made sense or not. I don't know. Yes.
I have two very short questions.
Sure.
One is, you said the number of chemicals that increased, right?
Yeah.
And the 1750 onwards, the human-made chemicals,
Right.
we didn't get a number for that, so I'd be interested to know.
It can only be an estimate, because even this 22,000 number, I think, Ravi, perhaps you know it better, but this is a broad number that came out from one of the, was it the PIC database? UNEP reports, yeah. So, we don't have a pakka number, because Bayer is making a few 100,000 and somebody else is making a few. We don't know who's doing what. Yeah.
And the other question is, I mean, I've read your book and I've really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
And I recommend everyone read it. But I mean, this was a lovely journey through Deep Time and revisiting so much of the book's materials. But I'm also interested in, I mean, plate tectonics is at work even now, right?
Yeah.
So India's still moving at the rate of a fingernail or something up.
That's right.
So is there a model of future play, of what the play of the continents is going to be?
Yeah, there is, and in fact, there are two different models. One, of course, I mean, both those models agree that Africa is going to merge with Southern Europe, and so our climate migrants don't have to take those arduous journeys anymore. But the challenge is in the position of Australia vis-a-vis Southeast Asia. A lot of people imagine that Australia is going to rotate and go closer to Hong Kong, around there. The others are saying that it might go northwards. India is going to tilt towards Arabia. That's where the tilt is going to happen. Yeah. So that's what both the models say. So.
And where are
Arabia.
the models being developed?
One is by this group in Hong Kong University, and the other is Scotty's, the person whose models I use. So both of them are available on ResearchGate if anybody is interested. I'm happy to send you the link.
What about like bits of Northern Europe that seem pretty unstable, the Scandinavian peninsula and so on?
Right. So, the good thing about Northern Europe is because it's granite and there's no real volcanic movement from below. So they are going to be pretty stable till you have big thrust from Africa and the Rift Valley, which will start to elbow it towards, and the split will happen. Yeah, it's going to be a Moses moment, but it's going to be a very slow Moses moment, or Samson moment rather, pushing the earth. Yeah. Okay. Coming from you, it means a lot. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranay, for have a brilliant talk again. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll carry on the conversation another time. But I'm deeply grateful to all of you for joining in and making this a part of an ongoing conversation, but also to thank the team here, Sukanya, of course, and Shubhankar there, who's done all the networking. And that's our team, right? That's us, three of us. Okay, thank you. No. And of course, to Gayatri and to Zishaan and to everybody else who was here. Thanks.